Yashasvi Jaiswal is the joint second quickest to 1,000 runs by a number of matches after Bradman. Yes, this is another not since Dom stat for the world's most, determined 10-year-old. And we also have Ben Duckett claiming that Bazball inspired him. The same Ben Duckett who was picked as a spin specialist in 2016 and could not actually buy a run. What about Rohit Sharma, who got the chance to open the innings in 2019 and said he felt like it was his last shot at the format? He became the Test captain at 35 and has now led India to a series triumph against the Bazballers. What about Zach Crawley and Usman Khawaja, who were the top run getters in their Test side for the last Ashes, and their strike rates were on, practically the opposite side of the spectrum? Speaking of scoring speeds, Craig Brathwaite has entered the chat. His strike rate is 4 points less than Cheteshwar Pujara's, which is like being slower than an injured sloth. What about people who know their game like Dimith Karunaratne, who has specific goals in sight? He wants to be better than Usman Khawaja, reach 100 tests, and then get 10,000 runs in total. Let us not forget Devon Conway, who sprinkled kitty litter on practice wickets so he could counter spin when the ball spits out of the rough. New Zealand openers, even the ones born in South Africa, have always been quite weird. And we have the greatest batter of this era, Steve Smith, volunteering to open. He talked up his average of 60 after 4 innings with 2 not outs, and followed it up with 50 runs in 4 knocks against New Zealand. The greatest batters of all time don't just decide late career to open the batting. So it's very clear that something is very odd about Test opening right now. Dean Elgar is gone. Alistair Cook as well. There are no Chris Rogers on the horizon. We have entered a truly bizarre part of Test cricket where the opening batters are some of the weirdest things in our sport. That makes trying to work out who is best even harder than usual. If you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months, plus gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a blocker protects the stumps with NordVPN today. All those fascinating quirks tell us something about the variety of openers we have in the modern game. And let's face it, opening this era has not really been that easy. Scoring Test runs anywhere has been difficult, especially if you're facing the brand new ball at the start of the innings. But things are getting a little bit better over the last couple of years, though 2024 it is a bit low again. Out of the 28 batters with at least 500 runs in the last 5 years, only 9 average more than 40. And that makes it sound like there's a lot more runs being scored than there actually are, because 3 of those are from Pakistan, where flat wickets roam free. And none of them average more than 30 outside of Asia if we take away Zimbabwe. Mayank Agarwal is in a similar situation. He averages 69 at home, but only 19 outside of Asia. Jaiswal has obviously had a dream start to his career, but even he struggled in South Africa. So while we can not since Dom him all we want, he clearly needs a lot more time and experience in as many locations as possible. Duckett is the fastest scorer in the world after Harry Brooks since his return to Tests. But he's also only played in 5 full series since that comeback. It seems to be working pretty well when he is not facing R. Ashwin early on, but teams now know a lot more about him than they did before. Whereas Zach Crawley has the counting stats, but he still averages less than 35 overall. However, that has gone up in the last 2 series against 2 of the best bowling attacks in the world. But there still aren't enough big scores in a row. He is certainly the king of the high impact start, which to be fair, is exactly what England asked him for. But you'd still expect these guys to do it longer to enter the conversation of who is best. For instance, not that long ago, Devon Conway had a superb start, averaging 68 in his first 5 tests as an opener. That mark has now fallen off a cliff in the next 8 matches. He averages slightly below 40 now. Teams have worked out that he plays outside the line, so now it is his turn to adapt. Tom Latham is still around, but his numbers just hold up in Asia, except Bangladesh. He is not dominating at home either. No one doubts he can play, but the more you look at his record, the more he actually slips down the list. David Warner and Dean Elgar are 2 big names who retired earlier this year. They are among the top run getters, but their dips in form meant they are still averaging around the high 30s. Both cashed in at home, but really struggled on the road. So, if you are looking for a short list, the three names have to be Rohit Sharma, Karunaratne, and Usman Khawaja. In terms of runs and average, they are really apart from everyone else. The primary role of a test opener is to see off the new ball. Karunaratne and Khawaja are a cut above the rest when it comes to this, with a balls per dismissal ratio of over 100 in the first 20 overs. And Rohit is not that far behind either, especially when you consider he can also attack early on if needed, like he did in this last series. Duckett gets out the most often amongst all openers. But the game is also about scoring runs, and Duckett comes back up to number 4 on average. The top 3 remain the same once again, except for the fact that Rohit has a better average despite a lower balls per dismissal ratio, implying that he is a quicker starter. Only Rohit, Duckett, Karunaratne and Conway average above 45 against pace in this time period. And Khawaja is not too far behind with 42. And a lot of the low scores are of course from wobble ball. Remember, it was only 10 years ago that people were briefly saying that opening was an easier job. No one has been saying that in the last couple of years. Khawaja and Karunaratne average over 60 against spin. Imam and Rohit are also above 50. And shout out to Jaiswal, who has a not since Dom average of 112 against spin, but just misses out on this cutoff. Openers often have high marks against the turning ball, and one reason is they are set when they actually go out to face it. A batter's match factor ratio compares their average to the rest of the top 6 batters featuring in those games. Rohit averages nearly 1.5 times more than the rest of the top 6 batters in the games he plays, making him a clear standout on this metric. Those incredible innings when no one else could actually score at home are what drives this. But Khawaja and Karunaratne also do very well on this. So I think we can prove that these are the best 3. But the question is, who has the greatest claim to be number 1? In Test history, successful teams have often used attacking openers like Victor Trumper, Gordon Greenidge, Matthew Hayden, Vrinder Sehwag, and David Warner to disrupt opposition bowlers. And Virat Kohli's thought process when promoting Rohit Sharma was quite similar. And he had even mentioned how Rohit had been promoted in one-day cricket. Nasser Hussain backed Rohit Sharma, the test player, way back in 2018 after India's tour of South Africa, where he had struggled in the middle order apart from one innings and was eventually dropped. But Rohit did not have a terrible record in the middle order. However, it is worth noting that he played on a lot more batting-friendly surfaces back then, and his teammates averaged a lot more than he did. Now, he is averaging nearly 10 runs extra than the rest of the Indian top 6 and 22 more than the opposition in the matches he's played as an opener. That is absolutely huge. His big problem as a middle order player was always away from home, and he's now seen a significant improvement on that front. The Indian skipper still averages more than 50 at home, despite the pitches in 2021 to 2023 being, horrendous to bat on. Rohit has an outstanding record against pace, both home and away, in an era where the wobble ball has been prominent. It is interesting that he is at his best against paces with the new ball and then spinners afterwards. His record from 6 tests in England is absolutely superb, but he does have a low average in Australia and South Africa. However, he's only played 2 tests in each of those countries, and even his huge average in the West Indies is only from a couple of games. It will be interesting to see how he fares in the upcoming Border Gavaskar Trophy of 24-25, because Australia is a country which should suit his natural style of play. He did a good job to handle the new ball last time, but he couldn't cash in and make the big score in the 4 innings he was actually out there. But he averages 41% more than the rest of the top 6 batters in England and 65% in India. In fact, both him and Rishabh Pant have been particularly good on wickets that have been very helpful for spinners. Remember, Rohit Sharma was 32 when he started opening the batting for India in tests. And the fact that he was able to crack it at that age is incredible. But talking about old career turns, Before January 2022, Usman Khawaja had opened in only 7 innings in Test cricket. However, scoring 484 runs at an average of 97. Travis Head was ruled out of the SCG test at that time, so Khawaja slotted in at number 5 and made twin tons. After Head returned for the following game, Marcus Harris got the axe and Khawaja went up the order to open with Warner. Often, players start opening near their peak batting years, and therefore they make it work because of that. Khawaja was 35 when he went to the top order full time. And despite those twin tons, Khawaja actually averages 15 more when he is opening innings in Test cricket compared to further down. But of course, this does also include his opening batting before 2022. Khawaja averages 10 more than his teammates and 18 more than the opponent's top 6 batters since he started opening full time. Much like Rohit, Khawaja was actually better at home when he played in the middle order. The major differentiator has been his away record, where he averages a staggering 30 runs more. And against both pace and spin, we have seen a rise after those first 20 overs. But it would be fair to say that he prefers to face spin a lot more than the quicks. Which makes sense, because of course, Khawaja was a middle order player. But it also shows that he has found a way to handle the quicks, which again is incredible considering the age that he started this job. And that all adds up when you look at his record by venue. He averages more than 40 in India and Sri Lanka and a mammoth 165 in Pakistan, although perhaps the flat wickets there helped a little bit. But you do still have to score the runs. He averaged over 40 in England and was the top scorer in the Ashes. He didn't really get going in the most recent series against New Zealand, but that is the only country where he doesn't average 40 or more. And even though Pakistan dished out some of the best batting wickets that any human being has ever been able to stand on, Khawaja was still the standout, averaging more than 3 times the rest of the batters. And this was his first overseas tour since promoted up the order full time. A match factor ratio of 151 in India is also incredible. He scored 81 at Delhi in a losing cause, 60 at Indore on a wicket where scoring runs was probably the toughest, and then 180 in the final test at Ahmedabad. Coming up, Khawaja actually has 2 interesting challenges, touring Sri Lanka and then playing the well-rounded India attack at home. And while he has played a lot of cricket and made more runs than expected, it will still be after these tours we'll have a real idea of how incredible he is. And then the final guy is Karunaratne, who averages 14 more than his teammates and 11 more than his opponents in the top 6. And he is, of our shortlist, the only actual opener. Outside of starting his first-class career briefly down the order, Karunaratne has been a full-time opener ever since. And that is the only job he has ever had at Test level. He prefers playing at home, but his away average of 38 is not too bad either. He gets decent support from his teammates when he is on the road, like Angelo Matthews and Dhananjaya De Silva. At home, though, he is kind of the main character, averaging almost 30 runs more than the rest of his teammates. Karunaratne is at his best against both pace and spin when he is facing the new ball. His spin numbers continue to be outstanding throughout the course of his innings. And before we look at his records by location, it is worth noting that he only plays in 2 test match series, both home and away. Which means that bowlers can't really work him out, but also when he's on top, he can't cash in the same way that other players would. Clearly though, he prefers playing in Asia, averaging above 40 in Bangladesh, India and at home, except Pakistan where he averages 33. But he also averages more than 50 in New Zealand, which is not exactly the best place to be an opener. He doesn't play Australia or England in this time period, which is a bit of a shame. But Sri Lanka will tour England in this summer, which will be a really good opportunity for him to show his best. His record at home is terrific. But who does he score those runs against? Well, he averages 100 against Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Ireland, 75 against New Zealand and almost 70 against the West Indies. His average of 45.66 against Australia looks like a pale shadow compared to the rest, but that is actually more than fine. He struggled against Pakistan, who toured Sri Lanka twice in this period. But when we look at the match factor ratios by country, he is above par in 4 different nations. Although his match factor ratio is below 1 in South Africa, he actually scored a great 100 at Johannesburg, where the best next knock by a Sri Lankan was 36. and he failed to get going at the first test at Centurion, which was actually quite a high-scoring match. And we've mentioned it before, but he doesn't cash in on the friendly batting surfaces in Pakistan, the poor guy. And he also hasn't scored as many runs in the West Indies. But Sri Lanka are set to tour Bangladesh, England and South Africa in this WTC cycle. And if he does well in these games, particularly the latter two as he is an Asian opener, it would enhance his legacy as one of Sri Lanka's finest in this format. And if you don't know, the 35-year-old is already their 5th highest run getter of all time in tests. On top of the fact he's one of the smartest players in our game, he now has a chance of finishing 3rd all time in the Sri Lankan record books behind Sangakkara and Jayawardene, and they were both pretty handy. But what about directly comparing each player? Let's have a look at how they perform versus the other batters in their games. They've all had decent support from the rest of the batters in their team's top 6. However, the major differentiator has always been the batter's away record. And we know that India and Australia have a much better bowling unit than Sri Lanka. What about availability? If a player is at the peak of their powers, it is not ideal for them to miss over a quarter of their team's matches. Unfortunately, that is what happens with Rohit. He still plays a few more tests than the other two, but he also misses quite a few games. 3 in South Africa, 2 in Australia, New Zealand, Bangladesh and India, and 1 in England. Him playing these games could have gone either way, but what it meant is that India had to look for replacement openers again and again. In terms of strike rate, Rohit and Karunaratne have both shown the ability to bat quickly when needed, which is reflected in the number of 50+ scores at a strike rate of over 60. Khawaja only has a couple of knocks above this mark. Most of his innings have come at a strike rate in the 40s. He's very comfortable there. But Rohit is comfortably the most talented and versatile player of this lot, and he has played on tougher surfaces than the other two have. But Khawaja has not missed a single test for Australia and is equally impressive, if not better, in terms of overall record. Karunaratne deserves to be praised just for making it through the mire of Sri Lankan cricket over the last couple of years and also not being from a Big Three nation. And he only missed 2 matches and obviously also leads his side. And all of these players have been incredible recently. So there is no real easy answer for who is best. I think Rohit has the biggest impact, and Karunaratne has the longest run while also being the truest opener. And Khawaja has probably become the best defensive option in modern cricket. And some of this does just come down to your preference. Rohit has more hundreds than 50s, while Karunaratne does actually pass 50 the most. But Khawaja faces way more balls than either of them. If you want a match winner, Rohit is probably your guy. If you want someone to face as many balls as possible, it has to be Khawaja. And if you want a combo of both, Dimuth is probably the one you would look for. But let's just stop for one moment. If you add in Crawley, Duckett, Conway, Smith, Jaiswal, one thing is for sure. We have one of the weirdest collection of openers in Test match cricket that we have ever had right now. A lot of people complain that I'm not a former cricketer and so that I don't really know the game. Well, you know what they can't claim? That I don't know desks. I've been using desks for years. I'm a collector of desks, old and new, and I'm sitting on a new one right now. I'm the Don Bradman of sitting at desks. So when I tell you that the E7 Pro next generation height adjustable desk from FlexiSpot is legit, this is like Michael Jordan talking to you about sneakers. This desk holds 160 kilograms. It is as stable as anything I've ever seen, and it has under-desk cable management. But really, the main skill here is that this desk rises and falls at the push of a button, and it moves super quick. And it has so many settings that remember your favorite heights. It really does it all. And I could not recommend the E7 Pro from FlexiSpot anymore, even though I am currently sitting on one of FlexiSpot's BS12 Pro multifunctional, adjustable, upgraded fabric, ergonomic chairs. My butt and computer have never been happier than when using one of FlexiSpot's products. So get over to their page right now for big savings.